Good evening. From the campus of Gardner-Webb University in Boiling Springs, North Carolina, this is Webb Connections, a forum that tonight will address the Supreme Court, the NCAA, and the future of college athletics. My name is William Downs, president of Gardner-Webb University. And at Gardner-Webb, we are proud, very proud of our Running Bulldog teams and of our 600 student athletes who compete each year in NCAA Division I sports. At Gardner-Webb, athletics is a hugely important part of the collegiate experience, just as it is at universities all across the country. It's clearly important for the athletes themselves, for those who practice and sweat and work hard each day to get better, all while also working hard in the classroom to earn their degree. College athletics is hugely important for alumni, for fans, for the people who live in college towns. It's fun to watch, it's fun to cheer, it shapes rivalries, and sometimes it divides families for life. We also know that college athletics is big business. It shapes institutional revenues. It attracts donors and corporate sponsors. It generates profits for network and cable TV. And winning programs often translate into increased enrollments. Colleges and universities invest millions in scholarships to attract and retain student athletes. They invest millions on facilities to impress recruits and to attract fans. Coaches' salaries at large schools resemble an arms race. There are more than 70 head football coaches in the NCAA making more than $1 million each season. What brings us together tonight is the prospect, indeed now the reality, that student athletes can generate revenue for themselves while still being in college. Actions taken earlier in 2021 by the Supreme Court, by Congress, by state legislatures, and by the NCAA now enable college student athletes the freedom to receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness. But this is no simple or clear set of changes, and the consequences, both short-term and long-term, are yet to be determined. To help us clarify what exactly has changed and what it means for athletes, for their schools, and for the future of amateur athletics, we've assembled a 6-person panel of experts. Our panel includes perspectives from coaches, from an athletics administrator, from the sports media, from the legal world, and most importantly, from the vantage point of a student athlete. Let's now meet our panel. On my immediate left, Kyle Callender, Commissioner of the Big South Conference. Kyle is now in his 26th year as Commissioner of the Big South, which is home to 12 full-time member institutions spanning 3 states, along with 7 associate member institutions. The Big South competes in 19 championship sports. During his tenure, the commissioner has seen the conference grow in its marketing and in television exposure, in its digital presence, and most importantly, in the success of its student athletes on the field and in the classroom. Kyle's led the creation of the Big South Academic Consortium of Big South Chief Academic Officers and faculty athletics representatives to develop shared academic programs and resources among member institutions. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Kelly Bardick is sports anchor at WCCB Charlotte and perhaps most importantly, a Gardner-Webb alumna. Woo-hoo. Bardick brings the latest from the world of sports throughout the week on WCCB TV News at 10, and she co-hosts Got Game on Sunday nights at 10:30. She joined the WCCB Charlotte team in October 2003 as a news reporter, but quickly made her way to the sports department. She graduated from Gardner-Webb with a bachelor's degree in communication and a minor in Spanish. Kelly, welcome back to your alma mater.
Thanks for having me.
Next, Alex Simmons enters her 4th season this fall as the head coach of Gardner-Webb's women's basketball program. Gardner-Webb was Simmons' first head coaching job after assistant coaching stints at Middle Tennessee State from 2010 to 2013, then Ole Miss from 2013 to 2018. Coach Simmons played for the legendary University of Tennessee coach Pat Summitt, winning 2 NCAA championships, 2007 and 2008, in 3 Final Four appearances. Coach, thanks for your time tonight. Jim Chester is in his 2nd year as the head coach of the Gardner-Webb baseball team after taking over the program in June of 2019. In 2021, Coach Chester's team compiled a 29-23 record, going 27-13 in the Big South, earning him Co-Coach of the Year honors in the conference. In his second season, Chester mentored star pitcher Mason Miller, who was an eventual third-round pick by the MLB's Oakland Athletics. Coach, thanks for bringing us your perspective this evening. And next we have Anna Marie Fish, Gardner-Webb soccer player and president of the Student Athlete Advocacy Committee, SAC. A native of Lillington, North Carolina, Fish graduated from Wake Christian Academy, played 2 years at East Carolina University before transferring to Gardner-Webb. Great decision, Anna. She's a biology major with a minor in Spanish. She has also served as a senior class senator in the Student Government Association. Anna Fish has played in all 10 matches this season, logging 881 minutes on the pitch, including all 90 minutes with 2 shots on goal in a very hard-fought match just last night. So she's taken the ice pack off her knees and come in just for us this evening. Anna, thanks for coming in and representing all of our student athletes. Last but not least, Steve Sirk, Gardner-Webb University Counsel. Steve Sirk came to Gardner-Webb also from East Carolina University, where he provided direction on state and federal laws and training in all aspects of faculty, staff, and employment issues. Gardner-Webb's first in-house legal counsel, Sirk holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from the University of Northern Iowa and a JD from the University of Iowa College of Law. Steve, always grateful for your wise counsel. So that's our panel. We have a live audience here tonight, and after some prepared questions, I'll open the floor for Q&A. But let's get started. This past summer, the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously upheld the Ninth Circuit's decision, ruling that the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA, cannot restrict education-related compensation benefits for student athletes. While the decision itself was quite narrow, observers were quick to point out that its ramifications have the potential to lead to litigation and new legislation which could drastically alter the relationship between the NCAA and student athletes. So Steve, Sirk, I want to start with you. Can you help us understand the legal foundation, unpack the legal foundation of tonight's conversation? What happened back in the summer?
Well, to understand this fully, we really have to go back to 1890, believe it or not. And I'll try to be as brief as I can. That is when Congress passed what's called the Sherman Antitrust Act. And that forms the legal backbone of this decision, believe it or not. Back then, Congress was very concerned about what were called trusts. They're actually monopolies. We call them monopolies now. They're companies that can control prices and supply and just basically charge as much money as they wanted to. Imagine if I owned every gas station in the country. I could charge whatever I wanted to for gas. Congress says we have to stop that. So they passed a very broad statute which said that there shall be no conspiracy, contract, or group that shall impede commerce. Very, very broad. And they used it against companies called like Standard Oil that were impeding competition. And flash forward 120 years, and somebody started looking at the NCAA rules. They have, and continue to have, very strict rules on many things, including compensation that athletes can earn. And for example, I think a good example is Trevor Lawrence, star quarterback for Jacksonville now. But when he was in college, he could have made lots of money doing endorsements. He could have made lots of money if he had perhaps put his services out there to Alabama or LSU or some other school. NCAA rules prohibited that. We know now he's able to make much more money because he's in professional sports. But while he was in school, the NCAA rules would not allow him to profit from his name, image, or likeness. And so somebody got the bright idea, hey, this statute is really broad. The NCAA rules are impinging commerce. They're not allowing these student athletes to get what they would get in a free market. And so they brought a lawsuit against the NCAA, and the NCAA said, whoa, we're not even subject to this statute. We are not subject to this statute. And the litigation went on for about 10 years. And in the lawsuit that Dr. Downs mentioned, the Alston case, Supreme Court came down and said, wait a minute, you are subject to the Sherman Antitrust Act. And as Dr. Downs stated, there was a very narrow ruling with just regard to some tuition-related benefits. However, it's really opened Pandora's box because unlike any other Supreme Court case, the court has now found that the NCAA is subject to the Sherman Antitrust Act. So now, in order to try to get ahead of some of the litigation that will probably come, the NCAA, the conference, and several of the states have allowed students to go ahead and profit from their name, image, and likeness. And as we keep going on, I've got some ideas about where this eventually might go.
Steve, you just mentioned a few states have taken action on this. What's the position in North Carolina? Any legal action in our state?
Sure. The governor issued an executive order on July 2 saying that students could profit from their name, image, and likeness. So we took what we got from the conference, which was very helpful, and conference council. We took what the NCAA said, and we took the governor's executive order, and we combined them into the Gardner-Webb policy, which is much like the other schools' policies in the conference and in the country. So we are subject to the governor's executive order. The state legislature did not act, but the governor did.
So let's take this through the lens of the Big South Conference, Mr. Commissioner. At first blush, did you see this as a good thing? What does it mean for us in the Big South?
Well, first of all, I've been a supporter of student athletes' ability to monetize name, image, likeness for some time. Those that have been around the league for a while, I think no one understands that, but really to a point. Where I have difficulty is when you start crossing the line into endorsements. So I've always felt there needed to be a line of demarcation between professional athletics and college sports. That's what makes college sports so interesting and exciting, is that we're not professional sports. And I was always concerned that we cross the line to sponsorships and endorsements, that we might be blurring that line a little bit. But once you start going down that path, to some of Steve's points, where can you draw the line without putting yourself at risk from a litigation standpoint? And that's really what we're faced with right now, and what we're reacting to is the litigation that's taking place out there against the NCAA and the member conferences and schools. So why did the name, image, and likeness legislation, or lack thereof, really become so broad? It's because of our concern about litigation and being sued. The Alston case that's been referenced, the NCAA's legal fees for that were $40 million. The conference is being charged for part of that. So everybody in the NCAA is paying for part of that. The Autonomy 5 conferences, the major conferences in the NCAA, currently are spending over $250,000 per month on legal fees. The NCAA is facing over 70 lawsuits currently. So it's a litigious environment, and there's a lot of concern about how do we move forward in this litigious environment? How can we afford to move forward given these outlandish legal fees that we're faced with? NCAA has become a popular whipping boy, a popular target for these lawsuits, and so that's a real concern. And unfortunately, as we move forward, our focus is going to be on how can we not get sued, instead of how can we benefit our student athletes, how can we have a true collegiate model that we are trying to defend and trying to provide and trying to support our student athletes. So it's a real challenge right now, and I think we'll talk about the transformational change going on in college athletics right now, but the basis of that really is because of the environment we're in. Again, I think it's great student athletes are benefiting from this, and to be clear, the NCAA was working on name, image, and likeness legislation for 2 years before Alston came down. So we saw the writing on the wall. We wanted to provide that, but because of the Alston decision, it ended up being a much broader permissive legislation than originally envisioned. There are two key tenets to the name, image, and likeness legislation. It can't be pay for play, and you can't use it as a recruiting inducement. Really? Have you seen what's going on out there right now? As expected, it's chaos. There is a lot of recruiting inducing going on there right now. It's only been 2 months. And so how do we put the genie back in the bottle as far as that goes, and how do we control this moving forward so it doesn't become really an unfair situation?
Just an example of that. sorry to jump in, but Nick Saban said his starting quarterback, who hadn't even started a game yet, was already making 6 figures due to not endorsements, but the NIL. That's a recruiting tool.
Yeah, no question.
I want to go play for Alabama.
There you go. So Kyle, is this a phenomenon primarily of the Power Five, or does it matter to the Gardner-Webbs of the world?
Well, it matters a lot. Clearly, it is more of an issue for the Power Five conferences. The student athletes there are much more visible. So they certainly are targets to a lot more companies, especially right now. They're really trying to take advantage of the new environment that we're in. However, our student athletes can certainly take advantage. I'm sure there's student athletes at Gardner-Webb that are taking advantage. If you're an influencer,
One on the panel.
What's that?
There's one on the panel.
Yeah, exactly. If you're an influencer of any kind on social media, you have a chance to make money. And that's great, and we encourage that. And in fact, I think you're going to see a lot of student athletes that may not be the ones that you read about on Sunday mornings or read about in the papers or see on Kelly's newscast at night, that are the ones making the most money. It's the ones that are enterprising, the ones that are creative, the ones that are really doing some things in social media and otherwise that generate a lot of followers. So it certainly is more impactful at the Power 5 level, but Big South student athletes are able to take advantage of that as well.
Let's turn to our coaches now. How have these changes impacted, if at all, the relationship between coaches and their student athletes?
Personally, I think that we've gone more to individualized state of mind. And I've, even with my team, with the ruling, had to change my message to our team. So now our team it's okay to meet your individual goals. But if all 13 of you meet your individual goals, guess what? Now we meet our team goals. And so sending that message to them, I think it creates some responsibility with our student athletes now, especially the ones who want to take advantage of the NIL. And you have to make the decision. Do you want to do the work that it takes to do brand deals, to do sponsorships? And going back to your point, about Gardner-Webb and will this affect us, I think every student athlete should take advantage of it. If you look at women's basketball, I don't know about many sports, but I do know about women's basketball. The top 3 players are from Baylor, Connecticut, and South Carolina. Nalissa Smith, Paige Buchers, and Aaliyah Boston. But the top women's athlete for NIL is from Fresno State. They're sisters, Kavinder, Heidi, and I forget her sister's name. What's her name?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But why? What makes them?
So they had a following already on social media, on Twitter, on TikTok, Instagram. They had a following already. So as soon as July 1 came, the ruling was put on the table, they took advantage of it from Fresno State. And we're talking, that's considered probably a mid-major. I know in women's basketball it's a mid-major. So our Gardner-Webb athletes understanding that don't sell yourself short in this whole thing. You got to take advantage of the opportunities that you're given.
I personally did not think it would affect us, and I was actually on vacation, and Mr. Chuck Birch called me, and I think we got the first NIL request, baseball did, right after the ruling, so it caught me by surprise. And then a few other things started to roll, and I follow and echo a lot of what Coach Alex said. Completely support our student athletes, truly believe they need to explore any avenue that possibly could arise. Obviously, there's a continuous push to make sure we're working with compliance and doing all the proper things that we need to do. But I am very, very, very repetitive in reminding our student athletes, especially our players, obviously, that what got you to July 1 was your hard work, your dedication, your attention to detail. It made you who you were to possibly garner these opportunities and to not lose these characteristics and constantly focus on the things that have made you who you are today. And don't lose sight of those just based off of maybe some new opportunities that are in front of you. So again, great opportunities, a lot of new going on in athletics and what we need to do, but again, really to focus on that point. Can it be a positive for us? I truly believe it can. I think that we're going to lose maybe some recruits to NIL opportunities at Power 5 schools in so many ways, but like everybody says, there's an old adage, the grass isn't always greener. And the experience and the opportunities that may be sold to them early on may not be what they wanted or what was promised or possibly what they were going to have. And Gardner-Webb is going to be what is real and can be an outstanding experience in what exactly they were looking for in this whole student-athlete experience. I just think the piece of the pie in the student-athlete experience, the NIL, can't be as big as maybe it is proclaimed to be in so many ways.
So staying with the coaches for a second, and Alex, I think you were alluding to this a little bit, team chemistry is extremely important. You can have incredibly talented groups of individuals and not win a championship. Do you think that this NIL scenario where perhaps a Gardner-Webb will have a one or two players who can take advantage of that is going to compound your challenge of creating cohesive team chemistry?
I think it may, depending on who's in that athlete's corner, who's in their ear. If they're with a marketing agency, what that marketing agency is telling them. But at the same time, if, for example, Trevor Lawrence without football has no deals, and so he's got to keep
Hair care.
Maybe hair care.
Shoulders.
But and especially if you have to stay in shape, you have to perform. If those stats goes down, I would probably guarantee those dollar signs probably go down. So I think there's some motivation in that.
Team chemistry and culture is number one. There's nothing. It's culture beats talent any day of the week, and been a firm believer of that since the day I got into coaching. We personally have not battled any of that. I've made a point to have discussions with. We have what's called a leadership council within our program. It's the voice of our team. It's the young men that represent, like I said, the voice of the team. I've made it a notion a few times, but has not came up as a potential problem. But again, a lot of people say money's the root to all evil. And I do believe that, that's something we have to keep our finger on, because if one person does, start to, there could be jealousy, there could be separation, there can be isolation. But I think the core values that every program operates under, and I don't know coaches, but I bet if we sat down for a few minutes, they'd be similar on how we would go about our programs. And those pillars, those principles, whatever they are, if you can keep your student athletes focused on those, along with being able to explore opportunities, I think it's an outstanding thing moving forward.
Great. Let's turn to the media now. Kelly, how will NIL policies impact media coverage of athletics? And in particular, will mid-tier schools begin to receive less attention?
I don't think so. I think I can tell you on the local media level, because that's where I am in Charlotte, maybe the only attention it would get if it's, I think it was at Arkansas, the linemen got barbecue sponsors or something like that from, little like fun things like that we can mention, but in no way, shape, or form would I cover this team or give it more coverage because there's more NIL athletes or, taking advantage of that. That's not going to happen.
You think fans will notice a difference? Do you
I don't
think we'll see sponsorships all over college fields or uniforms?
I think if it turns into a NASCAR event, when they're spitting out sponsors during post-game interviews and things like that, and they rattle them off. I think that's going to affect how I think fans and media perceive, and everyone perceives, because you want it to be a pure collegiate sport, and that's what you don't want. That's where it is that blurry line between college and the pros and things like that. But hopefully that doesn't happen. I'm sure there's guidelines and policies where the student athletes don't say that. Instead of thanking God, they're thanking Nike or Disney or whatever their sponsor is. But
So-
it's not going to affect how I would cover Gardner-Webb or any of the big South schools or any school.
We've got basketball and baseball represented here. Those are obviously going to be impacted. Football is going to be impacted. But at Gardner-Webb, we got 22 teams. Do you think media coverage, and there's already a gap between media coverage of the big revenue sports, the big marquee sports, and others. I mean, lacrosse and volleyball and these great things where people compete. Do you think are they going to be more marginalized in the future as a result of this by less and less media coverage?
I think
When's the last time you covered volleyball at Gardner-Webb?
never. I'm sorry.
Join us tomorrow night. We play.
I'm sorry. Send me video and I'll run it on the air.
I will.
What was the question again before that?
Do you think that the gap in media coverage between the big marquee
Will get
sports
even
and the
bigger?
other college sports is going to widen over time as a result of this?
Maybe. I don't know. I think it just, I don't know. Probably.
Sadly.
I mean, it's already there, the gap.
Okay. Yeah.
Sadly, yeah.
Anna Fish, what are the student athletes saying about NIL? Was there euphoria in the locker rooms?
I think it was a very exciting time over the summer because athletes were finally given the opportunity to receive deals, whether or not they were going to get them. Now there's a chance. Because for some people, like for me with Celsius energy drinks, I don't
you snuck
necessarily.
that in beautifully. You snuck that in.
I don't think I necessarily got that for being a student athlete per se. It was just an opportunity to be a brand ambassador, but I never had the opportunity to do that before this was passed. So I think finally given.
Walk us through how you became a brand ambassador.
You get
so
paid for it.
it's-
You get paid for it?
I receive free drinks, free cases of energy drinks. So brand ambassadors just receive gear and they have to post them on social media. And non-athletes do this as well, but prior to the NIL being passed, we couldn't participate in that. So even if I wanted to receive a free t-shirt from a company and post a picture, I couldn't do that at risk of losing my eligibility. So with this being passed, I decided to DM companies on Instagram that I liked enjoying their products, and they sent me applications back, and I filled them out, and I was accepted into a few different brand ambassador programs, and now I post on Instagram a few times a month, and they send me products. So it's not always about getting cash, especially at a school like a lower level school, not a Power 5. You're not necessarily going to receive money, which is completely fine, but not having to buy pre-workout twice a month is nice.
Can I also add that just on a resume, as someone taking in resumes once you graduate and you're looking for a job, just the fact that you initiated that, I mean, that's so valuable to employers looking at that. Wow, this girl really got after it. It doesn't matter if you're getting paid for that, but just the fact that you went out and did that, I think is good for you. Man, I wish.
Her name's Anna Fish, by the way.
Good for you, Anna Fish. I thought of an answer back to the media thing.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I'm all over the place. Usually I'm asking questions, so it's weird for me to think of answers off the spot. Okay, please. But I think media is changing so much now. I mean, when's the last time, let me turn into WCCB, that's where I work, to see if they had volleyball on. No, you go right to the source. And so social media, I mean, people that are fans of these sports and want to see what these sports are doing, I mean, they go right to the source now. They don't need me anymore. I mean, seriously. That's why social media is so huge. I mean, hopefully I remain relevant and keep my job. I love what I do. But I mean, it's changing, and it's changing so fast, so fast. So who knows, might even open the door for more.
So given that moving target, given that dynamism, that change, it could be a little daunting for a student athlete. And you mentioned, you don't want to lose your eligibility by doing something wrong. To what extent have you been helped by the institution? Where do you go for guidance or information or help? Or what more could we be doing at Gardner-Webb or in the Big South Conference to help you?
I think Gardner-Webb did a great job. So when the NIL was passed, all student athletes received an email. And then once we got to school, we met with Carrie Drake and Tyler, who's the head of compliance, and they kind of walked us through the process of everything. And during that meeting, we learned that if you would like to receive a sponsorship or be a brand ambassador, you have to fill out a form through the school, and then Tyler will approve it or not. And then once that's get approved, you can start getting gear and stuff. So I think Gardner-Webb did a great job of letting us know what we needed to do to protect our eligibility, because that was a fear of my dad. Like, just be careful. Like, just because you can do things now doesn't mean that you should. And when you do things, you have to do it the right way. So I think Gardner-Webb did a great job of helping us, like, receive the benefits of the NIL correctly.
Good, good. I'm gonna throw just a few more questions out here. I'm gonna throw them out just to the entire panel. Anybody who wants to take them can, and then we're gonna open things up for Q&A. But, you know, one of the concerns I have is enforcement. If we've got rules, we've got boundaries, we've got limits, we've got things that are now enabled, but things that you still can't do, how do we enforce these? Or will this become a bit of a wild west of chaos? And, you know, Jim, you mentioned money being the root of evil. I mean, there's a lot of corruption that's been in sports, and NCAA's worked hard for a long time to make sure that the illicit influence of money is kept out. How do we enforce this in the right way? Anybody?
I think, you know, one of the things is, I think all of us coaches, as individuals, you know, you want to represent your family well, you want to represent yourself well. And where, you know, it's great that student athletes have this freedom, I do think that each institution should have some say-so as far as, is this company parallel to our mission statement? Now, could that be a little muddy waters? Maybe so. But I do think that institutionally, we should be able to look at these brands, look at these sponsorships, logos, whatever the case is, and have some say-so as far as what our mission statement is and what we stand for.
Yeah, you know what? Jack Daniels sponsoring a Gardner-Webb basketball player, I would assume.
Now,
What's Jack Daniels, I'm sorry?
I don't know how you would monitor that, but I think that is necessary.
Are there rules here at Gardner-Webb?
Oh, yes.
Things like that.
And I think we've already said no to some
Right.
things. And that's the rule guy down there.
Yeah, Coach, I was just going to say, the rules at Gardner-Webb, no tobacco, nothing that violates the mission statement. And Tyler Rosenberg here is the one, and I'm not going to cast aspersions here if somebody didn't follow all the rules. We're all friends here, but there is supposed to be a portal where students go in and they put actually a copy of the proposed contract in, or they write out what it is that they're going to advertise or promote. And so then Tyler looks at that and says, hey, is this contrary to what Gardner-Webb stands for? And makes a judgment call. Sometimes it's hard to sort of discern exactly what it's going to be, especially when it's a social media post. So it's sort of a wait and see thing. You know, what do we see? What happens here with this? So yes, we are regulating it. Now, whether all those regulations will hold up over time in court is another question. You know, as Kyle said, things are not going the NCAA's way right now in court.
Kyle, is that what you were talking about, just being fearful of litigation and things like that? Maybe a student athlete wants to, is that where the lawsuits are coming from? Like to the conference? I'm confused.
The lawsuits are coming to the NCAA because of limits that the NCAA has put on various things.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a lot of related to health and safety too, but that's really a different issue. But when you talk about transfers, you talk about the compensation, you talk about scholarship limits, those kinds of things where you have caps and you have regulation, that is what's being attacked in court. And that is what's going to change college athletics ultimately. But your earlier question about is there going to be chaos, the answer is yes. There already is. And in spite of institutions' best efforts, and everybody's trying to do the right thing, you've got boosters, you've got supporters of the university, especially the higher level, that are going to find ways to go around, either find loopholes or go around the rules to be able to get that star quarterback in California to come to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's That's why the NCAA rulebook is this thick, because we had so many people breaking rules, unfortunately. So that's one of my concerns. When we talk about my concerns earlier about NIL, that's one of my biggest concerns.
Right, these
Tough to
boosters have
monitor.
companies, and our company will, back your NIL, name and likeness, if you go to school here.
That's right.
I don't know how you regulate this.
We're headed possibly to the bad old days, back to the bad old days, where there was so much corruption. There were boosters just handing money out to kids to come to school there. And one of the rules we have in place, and one of the rules from the executive order, is that if a student does an endorsement, there has to be some relationship to the value. If you do 2 ads for a car dealership, you can't get paid $1 million. That's not a market, that is a bribe. That's a bribe to come to school. It has to be some sort of relationship in terms of market value. Now, how that's policed?
Yeah, how do you know how much?
Good question, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna sneak 2 more in here real quickly before we go to Q&A, but technical question. So we've got a lot of international student athletes at a place like Gardner-Webb. Are international student athletes eligible to take advantage of these benefits, or does that potentially cause visa issues that restrict employment? Anybody know the answer to that one?
It's my understanding that accepting NIL compensation could jeopardize an international student's visa. I'm not an expert on that. I think Chuck probably knows better than I do, but that's my understanding, unless something's changed in that regard.
So that's an important one. Anna, any chance that students are thinking about unions, college players' unions?
Not at Gardner-Webb.
Not at Gardner-Webb?
No, sir, that's not something that I've heard any student athlete across, even athletes in Power 5 schools. I haven't heard anyone speak on that.
Kyle, are you hearing that nationally at all?
Yes, I am hearing
What are the
that.
ramifications, you think, if that moves forward?
Well, student athletes become employees of the university. So now you are paid to play. Now you are professional. Again, one of my concerns going down this path is how are your fans going to react when your student athletes go out on strike because their scholarships aren't enough? How are the traditional college fans going to react or continue to support their alma mater if you're dealing with labor strife and labor issues that the professionals are faced with? There's a lot of other complicating factors, certainly in employer-employee law. Student athletes, you got to pay tax on everything you're getting. It's really complicated and really a dangerous path, I think. I think there are ways to kind of work around group licensing issues and things to benefit student athletes without unionizing. But it's out there, and I've heard actually some leaders in college athletics talking about, well, maybe that's something we need to think about, which is a little scary to me.
I think there's already informal unions, to be quite honest. I mean, how did this whole thing start from student athletes getting together? There was some years ago, student athletes were getting back pay from their universities. The NCAA women's basketball tournament, I mean, how did that start? Some student athletes got together, they went on social media. Softball, I think the same thing happened with softball. Their playing fields weren't very good. They got together, they got on social media. So when you talk about unions, maybe not formal ones, but there are definitely informal ones.
All right, so our panel has set the table nicely for us. I think the most engaging part is always the Q&A. We got a smart room, a bunch of people here. We got microphones, so we're going to open it up now for your questions and their answers.
Can I ask a question of Anna?
You bet.
Okay, Anna, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So this is still NIL related. And now I know this is an extreme example, but this is happening in other places at colleges around the country. So you have a star striker on your team that's national leader in goals scored. And the local car dealer decides, I want to give that student athlete a car. Yet your defense is also outstanding and leading, the country in, goals against average. So what's the locker room like in that scenario where you've got somebody getting all this benefit because they're the star striker, but defenders that aren't getting anything?
The girl that's getting the assist, does she keep picking it up the field to her?
I think this is a problem that is in sports regardless of NIL. There are people that put the ball in the back of the net, and there are people that block shots, and that's okay. Like, that's just life, and I think you have to be happy and content with the job that you're doing. And if the person putting the ball in the back of the net is winning you games, then you do your job and they do theirs. And some players get rewarded because their jobs are better looking, they're more fun. It's more exciting when someone scores than when you block a shot with your face. It's just more exciting. And so I think that's a problem that we deal with in sports, regardless of NIL, and I think that's based off character, like how you deal with those issues. Even when we were talking about the locker room with team chemistry, with some athletes getting sponsors, some not, that happens with scholarships. Like, that impacts the locker room. Like, coaches are always like, don't speak on how much money you have, but at the end of the day, like, it gets out and people are aware of that. So how you choose to react to that is based off your character. So I think that NIL is just another opportunity to act correctly on your character, and it reveals some of the bad parts of people that don't.
I think that even just think about the NFL. I mean, the center that's protecting the quarterback, hiking the ball. You never hear their name unless there's a holding call or something like that. They're not getting any deals usually. They're not on commercials. They're not getting paid that much as a quarterback, you know? I think it's just about character. And like you said, and you guys don't recruit poor character athletes.
I also
would
think
assume.
it's okay. Like, that's part of sports, and that Ford should give some of the defenders a ride in her car every now and then. Like, that's just part of life, and I think you just have to take it and move on.
You got the first call for the NIL. What was it?
Yeah, we had a baseball publication reached out about using the image of one of our players, and it's surprising. And and again, Dr. Downs alluded to, we had a 3rd round pick last year. We had a special baseball player, and it wasn't him. So it was because when Chuck called me and he said who it was, I said, "You sure?" And, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's just someone that didn't play as regularly as some other guys and different things. And it's, it's just interesting. You're talking about who may get some of the opportunities and not, may be based more on influencers on social media and different things along those lines.
I also think that gives opportunities to athletes that don't get as much time on the field or on the court. Those TikTokers, those sisters, they were famous before this was even passed, and they're receiving the benefit of being famous, not for being great athletes. So it provides opportunity for those that don't get recognition on the field, which I think is cool because everyone's a part of the team.
That's something that I read about also, that this can, I think it was a Wall Street Journal maybe, that this may benefit those athletes who have no aspirations to go on and play professionally, however, have some type of interest in whether it's social media or social media management or marketing. So,
Coach, let's assume you get just a stud on your team, right? And she starts being inundated with these kinds of deals. What recourse do you have as a coach, or what recourse do we have as an institution? If she signed that deal, we've approved that deal, but you find that her time is being compromised. She's not able to commit to your team the way she used to be able to commit to your team, and you want to put a stop to it. Are our hands tied there, or do we have the ability to overturn our approval of that agreement? Do we know?
Well, every athlete for us signs an NLI, and those are 1-year agreements.
What does that stand for?
National Letter of Intent.
Oh.
It's confusing, NLI, NIL. So, we do, I hate to use power, that's not a great term, but we have the authority, as long as it has nothing to do with their performance on the court, we do have the authority to excuse those players. But again, if her time is going into, if she's that type of player and her time is kind of going away from basketball and her skill into those endorsements or whatever it is, I think there has to be a reminder that you have those for a reason. So it would probably be in your best interest to continue doing what you were doing to get to that level.
Jim, if you've got let's say this NIL continues to evolve, seems to work fairly well. And we notice that you get a stable of Mason Millers who come through here, and they do They do great things and get great opportunities, and they start cashing in big. But they've got our brand. In some ways, they're leveraging our brand. They're seen on TV playing for Gardner-Webb, in a Gardner-Webb uniform, on our facilities. To what extent do you believe Gardner-Webb then has a share of that endorsement, that brand revenue that the student's receiving?
It's a tough question. Can I defer to the attorney? No, that's probably going to be an initial reaction from the institution, everybody involved in so many ways.
Because you're coaching them up. I mean, they're in part who they are because of what you've done for them, right?
You'd like to think that, that's, you know, in so many ways, for me personally, it's an after the fact thought. It's more, you know, again, I think that if we can put more effort and into our cohesiveness and our culture and a lot of those things, you'd hope that some of that would take care of itself. Now, again, this is uncharted territory. It's uncharted territory as far as that goes. I believe when that time comes, there's going to need to be a whole effort from the institution, compliance, and everybody involved. And I think we're going to have a way stronger understanding stance and where everybody needs to be as far as that goes. But, you know, for me personally, you know, to feel that the school or somebody deserves some of that because they have our uniform on, taking credit for some of that or having the feelings of accomplishment, again, I think would be something more down the road where you reflect back on what happened in a positive light as far as it goes. You know, my problem is when this student athlete starts using the words me, I, those type of things become prevalent. That would be more of a concern to me than some of the other things. And that would be where I would want to intervene at a high level and understand it's we, it's us.
So when the ruling came out this summer, if you follow student athletes on Twitter or Instagram, the consistent line was, I'm going to get my bag. And it was an icon, it was an emoji of a bag of money. Steve, I saw you had the microphone. You think institutions have 10% of that bag?
I think institutions can and will get in on that action. Our policy, sorry.
Get ready, Anna.
Our policy says, first of all, without our approval, you don't wear our uniforms, you don't appear on our facilities or with our logos. But I'm sure at Duke, Carolina, some of the bigger schools, they are probably doing deals with some of their players right now saying, okay, you wear our uniform, we get a certain percentage of that endorsement. Now, are we ever going to get there here? Not right away, I don't think so, but it's going on.
Interestingly, the next big lawsuit you're going to see coming out, it's called the House case, you all hear about it if you haven't already, it's just the reverse. That because so many major institutions, especially in conferences, are receiving billions, in some cases, dollars from media contracts, student athletes are beginning to say, we deserve some of that. So I think you're going to see more of those arguments coming forward than the reverse.
You say institutions are getting billions.
I think
Kyle,
if
Gardner-Webb,
the House
like to see our
case is
billion.
successful, if the House case is successful, and I'm not sure it will be, but you will see certainly the claim that student athletes should be getting a piece of our ESPN contract.
That's a hard question to ask because I think as a coach, you know, at the end of the day, without a student athlete, there is no coach. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I'm with you 100%.
But you're not on the panel, but I have a question for you. Would you be okay if a student athlete wore, you know, their brand new socks with their own logo or you can't do it on the jersey, I don't think, but somewhere during competition?
Quick answer, no. In fact, we've just now partnered with a company that's going to come in and work with us on our brand to harmonize our brand across those 22 teams. And no, I don't want us to be like racing cars with 14 different Starbucks stickers on our socks and things like that. Yeah, absolutely not. Good, we got a question. Outstanding.
Hello, I'm Harlan Wyatt. Alex, kind of going off of my question, the entrepreneurial side of NIL, I don't think like it's been talked about a lot, just because like we have the endorsements and the deals with Instagram and stuff. But what if like a student athlete just wants to sell T-shirts or sell like something that they create on their own, and it has nothing to do with their sport? Are the concerns the same with the university and all that you all are talking about, like the union and stuff? What if they just want to be a business owner? Like, what does that look like in the concerns? And have y'all seen that around?
Well, I think that's a great example of why I always felt student athletes should benefit from their name, image, and likeness, because they couldn't do a lot of the same things other students are doing. If another student wanted to do that, they could benefit from that, but our student athletes couldn't. So that's the kind of thing I think, certainly is appropriate, and, encourages student athletes that are entrepreneurial to be able to take advantage of that.
There is a Gardner-Webb football player that has started his own brand. He sells T-shirts and hoodies and stuff, so he has the opportunity to do that now with the passing of this.
Good question. Anybody else?
Hello, quick question for y'all. So obviously at the Clemsons and other Power 5 schools, they are doing these multi-million-dollar endorsement deals with like McDonald's and Bojangles and all those other kind of brands. But instead now they can go directly to the student athletes. How do you see that having an effect on the institution's endorsement deals?
Are you guys worried you're going to lose money to the student athlete?
I think it's a great question, and that has been speculated out there. And of course, what you're reading publicly from athletics directors and others is that they are not concerned about that student athletes, that's their right to benefit. But I think behind closed doors, there is concern about that. And when you start talking about student athletes potentially doing deals with apparel companies, those are pretty big dollars that are going into athletics programs. And so does that siphon away money from institutions and athletic departments? You could foresee down the road that could in fact happen. So I think there is some concern about that.
Would it be, I guess this would be would it be feasible to say that, to me, if an athlete, if you and as an athlete, student athlete, if you're willing to pay a manager a percentage, why wouldn't you be willing to pay your school a percentage?
Right, and I think that's the decision that the athlete has to make. And at the end of the day, the first institution or thing that you represent is Gardner-Webb. Like when I step on the field, the first thing that I represent is Gardner-Webb. And so, I don't know. I think that's a really tricky question. I have not reached out to get a manager or an agent. I don't want to go that big. That's not something that I would like to do. But for someone that is in a big school, I think that'd be a good question to ask them. Like, would they be willing to give back to their school, I guess, in a sense?
Some schools already, I know Charlotte, I know Chapel Hill, they have a system in place where it's not part of the school, but the school brought it in. So I'm sure the school's getting some kind of kickback because that company's going to get a kickback. It's interesting how, I wish I was smart in developing all these apps like for things, software for all this stuff, because it's just a huge new market.
The group licensing concept they've got, Bubba Cunningham was very smart. I think he was one of the first ones to do that. For their student athletes. But there are institutions, and maybe Steve was referencing this, where they do allow their student athletes to do licensing deals with the university. So they could go out and wear Gardner-Webb insignia and Gardner-Webb uniforms if the institution allowed it, and the university then would get a licensing percentage from that deal.
Dr. Downs has to hire me an assistant attorney then, if we're going to do that.
All right, so for the past hour, we've been talking about change, things that have changed. I think it's probably equally important to talk about what has not changed about college athletics and amateurism. Anybody want to kind of reinforce what's still pure about the amateur model of college athletics that's been resistant to some of these changes?
Could I just address that from the legal side? This litigation is not going to change 99% of the rule book. There are still going to be rules on when you can start practicing, how long you can practice. The NCAA is not dead. The NCAA is not done regulating sports. When the courts intervene, it's going to be on these money-making, these big dollar issues that get all the headlines. But the NCAA is not going away. They've made that very clear. They're going to continue to regulate where they can and try to enforce amateurism. But where it goes in the courts, we just don't know.
Well, I'm part of a sport that has not had a lot of change over time. I mean, baseball's been a game where it's, you know, it's simple rules, and it's pretty much been what it is for a long time. I think that work ethic is going to provide positive results still. I think that good decisions are going to provide good results. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think within athletics, I think that a team with outstanding culture and buy-in and leadership and attention to detail and playing for the player next to them more than themselves is still going to rise to the top. The team with the most NIL deals will not win the national championship or their conference, in my opinion. And I still, like I mentioned earlier, and I believe Coach Alex would feel the same way, if we can keep our student athletes focused on our core values and pillars and things like that. The same things that won games, that won in the community, that won in the classroom for the last X amount of years are going to continue to win in the future.
Kind of feeling like Debbie Downer here, so I apologize, but I'll try to circle back and finish on a positive note here, and I'm going to be a little contrarian with what Steve mentioned. Some of you may know that Mark Emmert, the NCAA president, called for a constitutional convention in November. And the statement is that there's going to be transformative change in college athletics. Now, why are we doing this? It's because of Alston and because of the issues around antitrust and the fact the NCAA now is subject to antitrust rules. So I serve on one committee with commissioners. We have a study group within the conference, and there's an NCAA committee looking at this. And what we're trying to figure out is what can the NCAA regulate because of the Alston ruling. So there's some question as to whether we can still have scholarship limits within the NCAA. Well, what happens if we don't have scholarship limits? And we're all just trying to play for a national championship, right? So Duke's going to have 25 players on their men's basketball team on scholarship, or women's basketball team for that matter. Well, how many will Gardner-Webb or other Big South institutions have? We won't be able to afford that. So the competitive equity, the competitive fairness is, I think, really in question. So what can the NCAA regulate and not be subject to antitrust law? That's a question that's before us right now that we're really struggling with. What we will be able to do is to say that our student athletes are students. They need to be full-time students. We, as NCAA member institutions, need to support those student athletes to be successful in college, to get their degree and be successful in life. That will not change. We feel very good about that. Whether or not we can continue to manage a competitive atmosphere out there, given the limitations through the courts, is the ultimate question. But the student athlete's still going to be forefront in what we're trying to do, and the academic success of those student athletes is what we're all about.
So final exit question, ask everybody to gaze into your crystal ball just a little bit. We've mentioned genies being out of the bottles now. Let's go down the road 5 years from now. NIL still there? If so, is college athletics in a healthier, stronger position? Are student athletes faring better? If not, what put it back in the bottle? Steve, you got a thought?
Well, I'd hate to give a better prognosis than this, but I think in terms of money, we're headed more toward the pros, more of a pro model. I think pay to play is probably going to come. I think once you find that the NCAA is subject to the Sherman Antitrust Act, anything that constrains the amount of money that somebody can make goes by the wayside. And as Kyle was saying, it becomes so competitively unfair between us and Duke that where does education go? Where does the student athlete go? And I think that's what the NCAA needs to fight for us. We need to try to fight for on behalf of our student athletes.
I personally hope that it does not go as far to pay to play and all of that. Like, I hope that the NIL stays where it's at and gets better for athletes, but their character still stays intact. So I think that the reason you should want to go to a particular school is because you want to represent that organization, not because that organization has given you $1 million to go be the quarterback when you haven't started a game yet. So I hope that athletes continue to get the opportunities that they deserve. I hope that they take advantage of running kids clinics and doing stuff like that in their, like, where they're from. Because, for example, I couldn't run a kids camp over the summer because I was a student athlete before the NIL was passed. I couldn't give back to my community because of the rules that the NCAA had put in place, but now I can. I also hope that athletes choose to stay true to sports and the benefits that it provides. Like, don't charge a family $10 for your autograph after a game. Like, give a kid your autograph because you want him to grow up and want to be like you. Like, don't forget where you came from. And I think that's important, is people need to not look at the money, but at what good sports provide to the world.
Well said. Thank you. Coach.
I think no matter what happens, the haves are going to try to have more, whether it's NIL or whatever it may be. I mean, I think we witness it, and I think you see, I think the one scope that everybody maybe can relate to, maybe as a fan or involved with, or in college football. I mean, that's the one where we hear the most about, is the Power Five going to break off, or how's this going to work, or are different things going to go on? And I from my seat, I really hope that doesn't happen, but we're probably headed to where the haves are going to have more, and then I think we all can agree there's a gap, and the gap is probably going to get a little more in so many ways. And if I think we're trying to chase the gap, I think it's going to be we're going to fight a losing battle in so many ways as far as that goes, and trying to focus more on what Anna said and what our mission is as a university and athletic department and our student athletes, and educating our student athletes not in the classroom but in the community and all those type of things. I think that if we can stay to those values, we're going to end up on top.
Coach Simmons, you got a crystal ball?
I hope it stays. I hope we continue with the NIL. However, I hope that our message still is that, you're going to graduate with a high-level degree, you're going to compete at a high level, and you're going to win championships. Because, when I was being recruited, that was the draw to Tennessee. It was it was automatic that you were going to win a championship. And I go back and forth if I think that we should have had the NIL. I thought about that earlier. And honestly, I don't think that if we had it, that we wouldn't have the players that are still playing in the WNBA that I played against and with. The discipline, I don't think we would have had that. The hard work, the commitment to our sport and to each other. So, I'm all for it as far as the NIL. However, I do hope that the NCAA can find a way to control, because it is a big monster.
Yeah, regulate. I think it's just going to get even harder, just how quickly things change, especially when it comes to social media, because that's just the thing that's taken it to a whole new level. Back in, when we were in college, there was no such thing really as social media. Well, in my day, I'm older than you. Thank goodness I didn't have it. I think just when you were saying the gap between Duke and here, not everybody can go to Duke, though. They only have so many spots for so many athletes. And I think there is, there's a lot that Gardner-Webb offers. I mean, I went to a few colleges, but I graduated from this one. But my colleagues, they went to Florida, Georgia, big schools, but they didn't get the same experience that I got here. I mean, friends for life, family for life, and it's just an experience that, and I wasn't a student athlete here, but I was my dad was a coach. I was around a lot of athletes, and I think there's just something to say for that and what a school can offer, even if there's NIL. I don't know. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Hope you got tape of that.
We do.
You should have finished with that great advertisement. That was awesome.
And mic drop.
I felt this for a long time, but probably never more so than right now. And that is, if we're going to protect what we know as college athletics, the collegiate model that we try to call it, we have to have congressional intervention. We have to have an antitrust exemption, I mean, limited antitrust exemption. We got to get protected from all these lawsuits. That's the only way we're going to be able to regulate what we're doing, have fair competition, and continue to have college athletics within the academy. It's just really critical. Now, you hate to really ask for that because you never know what they're going to come back with. Congress isn't going to give you something without taking a pound of flesh. But that's where we are right now, in our opinion, and a lot of others as well. So I'm hoping that we get to that point and we are conducting college athletics within our universities in the way that we're familiar with and our student athletes are succeeding. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Okay, we have come to the end of our hour. This has been an extremely timely and important conversation tonight. I want to thank our guests, Kyle Callander, Kelly Bartik, Alex Simmons, Jim Chester, Anna Fish, and Steve Sirk for their insights and expertise. Obviously, much will be clarified in the months and years ahead. Until then, Gardner-Webb University will continue to support and cheer for our amazing student athletes. We will continue to support the spirit of competition that has built athletics into such an important part of the college experience. My thanks to all those here with us tonight in the audience, and to the 35,000 Gardner-Webb alumni out there watching from home. Go Dogs!